All right, here we go. Hey, everybody, it's Sam Andrus with the Terra Firma podcast, coming to you from Los Angeles, California. This is my attempt at a reboot, of the podcast. Here, it's definitely always a work in progress, but we must start somewhere. So that's what I'm doing. My hope is to be on once a week at the start, and so that's what I'm doing at the moment. And this podcast is going to be kind of wide-ranging. My first 6 episodes, I think it was, talk politics, philosophy, real estate, mortgages. I am a real estate and mortgage broker. I sell real estate, sell homes. Have been doing that for the better part of actually over a decade now, and here in the greater Southern California area. But my background is a little bit unique. I have a bachelor's degree in business administration, but I also have a master's degree in theology and philosophy, and I am very much a reader. I am a podcast connoisseur. I like current events, politics, philosophy, theology, kind of an eclectic mix of those things. All the things that actually make up life, but rarely do we ever dive in. Terra Firma, the name comes from the term that means basically solid foundation or solid ground, which is what we want to build our lives on, right? Ideally is a solid foundation. So, and it's also a play on real estate because homes are made on terra firma. Well, hopefully they are at least. That said, today I want to kick off talking about the November election, the election of Donald Trump. I've been holding off because of the holidays and just kind of kicking it around and being like, do I want to do podcasts again? Do I want to kind of venture in? And I decided, you know what? This is like a video journal for me. If the 5 people that ever watch an episode get something from it, beautiful. That will be great. So, and we'll see what happens. So it'll be a total work in progress, may look different every time. They say like your first 100 episodes are a work in progress. So we've got a ways to go, but we'll talk about the election, November election, Donald Trump being elected and what that all looks like and entails. And we'll talk about the Democrats and what happened there. Then I'll move to more home here in Los Angeles. And unless you've been living under a rock or in a submarine, even then you probably still have Wi-Fi these days. But nonetheless, you are aware of the absolute complete devastation and multiple fires up near me and here in the North San Fernando Valley. We had 2 fires that started. We had the Hearst fire that was just across the freeway here, about 1.5 miles from me, and could see the flames from my front door, but never got close enough to really be super concerned. We did have 5 years ago a fire in the same area that really dumped ash and smoke into my neighborhood, and so that was probably a little more scary than this one, although we were definitely vigilant. And then, of course, you have the Palisades fire, which is an unmitigated disaster, unspeakable tragedy. You have the Altadena Eaton Canyon fire. That one hits very close to home. I have a lot of friends and family. We'll talk about that in Altadena and around there. And then I'm going to talk about my take on California's leadership, our government officials, Los Angeles leadership, Los Angeles County, and then we'll go from there. So by way of background, like I said, I do have a master's degree in theology and philosophy. Not that that makes me qualified. It might make me minimally qualified or maximally qualified or not at all. I'll let you decide. What does that mean? It means I've read a lot of books. I've engaged a lot of different thinkers throughout different time periods in history. Aristotle to, the early church thinkers and Roman period thinkers to medieval thinkers to contemporary theologians and philosophers, and you're even till today, you're postmodern philosopher theorists. And so, while I'm not a scholar, I'm not a published scholar, I paint in broad strokes, but I do try to bring some critical thought and commentary to light. That said, the November election of last year, I got to say, I wasn't surprised at all. I had a family member that I got into a back and forth. Friendly, I love him to death. Nothing personal, but I'm somebody who always identified as center-left, really a classical liberal. So think John Locke, Thomas Paine, the founding fathers, freedom, liberty, personal responsibility, those types of things, right? Things that today probably seem conservative. if you're looking popularly, I'm kind of like a Bill Maher. And in fact, I respect people that are free thinkers. So people that are willing to question or challenge the status quo, specifically of the tribe or party they identify with. So Bill Maher would be a good example, who has a popular show on HBO. He's a comedian, travels around. He identifies staunchly as Democrat, which I do not, never have, although I do identify as a classical liberal. Not quite the same thing. But he critiques himself and the party. So famously, he called out Gavin Newsom. Bill Maher was spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to build solar panel network on his home in Beverly Hills. It took over 3 years just for the shack to get installed. So he showed all the 18 different agencies that had to come out, 3 years. And here's this guy spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to supposedly be environmentally friendly. And he famously called out and mocked Gavin Newsom, rightly so, and the state of California on his show for weeks and months on end. So that's kind of the lane that I identify in, is that I want to be a little bit contrarian, not for contrarian's sake, but I'm really concerned. I find that a lot of people are either staunchly Republican, maybe not as much in California, completely apolitical and don't care, or they're rabid liberal extremists who, sorry, let me back up. They're rabid Democrats or rabid liberal extremists who almost in like a tribal cultish manner identify with the orthodoxy of the Democratic Party or the extreme left. And so I am not surprised. If you go back to the Democratic Party and you look at from 2016 when Hillary Clinton ran, they are guilty of what I call next in lineism. So they have this cultural thing, and it may be in the Republican Party as well, I don't know, but that so-and-so is next in line. And so, you know, it would be wrong for Hillary Clinton not to be the nominee, except for the fact that Bernie Sanders would have won the 2016 Democratic primary, and he probably would have beat Trump. He would have certainly been a much better candidate. I voted for Bernie Sanders in 2016. I didn't agree with everything he said, but I liked his critique of international trade, very similar to Trump. They agreed on those things, and a couple other issues. I was stunned by the way the Democratic National Convention and Democratic Party railroaded Bernie out and it basically endorsed and put Hillary in. They then proceeded to do that in 2020. Bernie Sanders again was from a grassroots level going to beat Joe Biden out and was going to be the Democratic nominee, except for the fact the Democratic Party got a black South Carolina congressman, Jim Clyburn, to come out on before that primary and endorse Joe Biden and basically turn it, and then Joe Biden became the nominee. And the issue with that is, you know, maybe Joe Biden wasn't a bad guy. In fact, he's very different, 10 years ago. But he's clearly physically and mentally not in a, what would you say? What would be this way? Like sharp place to have ever been the presidential nominee. So while Trump had his own types of absurdities, Biden is in and of himself his own type of absurdity and parody, if you will, of the Democratic Party. So again, 2 times in a row over an 8-year period, they railroaded Bernie Sanders. Then fast forward to this past year, 2024, and the Democratic Party has somewhat of an outside challenger. I mean, the Kennedy family is famous in the Democrat. I mean, heck, his dad, Bobby Kennedy, Sr., and his uncle, John F. Kennedy Jr., our former president, were both assassinated. So clearly comes from a line of contrarian thinkers. Typically, people who are assassinated are not thinkers of the prominent state-run orthodoxy. So you have RFK Jr. coming out asking what I think are great questions. Questions about Big Pharma, questions about our medical supply, questions about how medicine and hospitals are run in this country. Questions about the CDC, which I think are all valid. I see my studio light just went out. I'll have to work on that, which are all valid. And I think the issue is, at the end of the day, the Democratic Party did not want those questions being asked, nor the ones that Bernie Sanders was asking. And there's really, this is why. And folks, this is the baseline for our conversation on this podcast. You have to, and I hope you do. If you don't, you can look into it. The Democratic and Republican parties are bought and paid for by the same corporations. So Pfizer, Merck, GlaxoSmithKline, Bristol Myers Squibb, these big pharma companies and little ones basically pay for the media, pay for MSNBC, pay for CNN, probably Fox News, maybe different corporations, and then pay for the candidates that run in these political parties. So they control the narrative and control the quote unquote facts, and thus they control the outcomes and they control how you and I vote potentially. I think Donald Trump is a Molotov cocktail to that. Now, is he a good one? I mean, probably not. He's not my style, but he is willing to say wild things and ask wild questions. This time, more importantly, though, I think he's probably hopefully learned a little bit. The fact that he brought in Tulsi Gabbard, Elon Musk, RFK Jr., these kind of disenfranchised people, you will, is a good sign, hopefully, that we're going to get people in that will ask difficult questions of these agencies. But the Democrats messed up big time. They got smashed. I told my family member that was like staunchly a Kamala supporter, the Democrats are going to get smashed if they install Kamala and run her for president. They're going to get destroyed. And that's exactly what happened. For a lot of reasons. And a lot of people that voted Democrat voted for RFK or voted for Trump or et cetera. People are tired of the status quo. You can't win national elections running on extreme ideas. And whether you like it or not, most Americans have and will continue to believe that a man is a man, a boy is a boy, a woman is a woman, a girl is a girl. And that's based on X, Y, and XX chromosomes. It's based on their physical anatomy. It's not complicated. And that while there are outlier situations, those are not the things for which we organize our society around. That's just how it goes. And it has to be, because you cannot make the predominant the rare exception. Right? So something that is not normative can't be made to be the normative function, right? What it's led to is all sorts of gender disillusions. Now, I believe there are in our society a significant number of people, although a minority percentage, that genuinely deal with gender dysphoria. And I feel for them. I believe adults have the right to live their lives the way that they see fit. So I wouldn't be against adults having a conversation about transsexualism, gender dysphoria, those things. But when you start bringing it down into where gender is this disconnected, relativist, detached feeling, right? So I feel like I'm not a man or a boy. I feel like I'm a woman or a girl, and therefore I am one. Well, no, you're not. That's 10 bridges too far. Now we're getting out of dealing with reality, the same reality that says, this is a table right here, this is an iPad, and this is a soundboard. Those are facts. Those are incontrovertible facts. Regardless of how I feel about them, that is what they are. And there's specific language that states what they are, that defines form and function. And so when you start getting into all these absurdities where you have schools doing drag queen story hour, I have nothing against drag queens. I don't understand it. I know it's kind of a fringe fetish, kink, culture, if you want to call it that, whatever it may be. But I'm sorry, I have no reason to believe that there's any place for drag queens to read to elementary kids or to kids in a library reading program. None. Just like I don't think there's a need for plumbers to come read to kids, or strippers, or people who engage in all kinds of cultural and sexual kinks. There's no need for them to be reading to children. So somehow that became prominent. And really what happened is there's a lot of people say, oh, it's not that big of a deal. Well, if you don't have kids and you don't have kids in school, then it's not a big deal. That's really what it comes down to. Once you have kids, you start asking real questions, right? When you start shopping in the kids section at Target and you see just an abundance of LGBTQIA stuff and pride stuff for a whole month, it just becomes like, why is that? Why does that need to be so overwhelmingly, overtly broadcast? We don't do that for anything else. We don't do that for Veterans Day, Memorial Day. We don't do that for anything else. So anyways, I just knew that them running on these and even being tangentially associated with those things was a loser. Trump famously ran the ad. Trump is for you. She is for they, them. And I knew that was game, set, matched. Because at the end of the day, the Democrats do not, for whatever reason, refuse to distance themselves from this. And in California, they embrace it and wear it as a badge of honor, seemingly, which is very odd. So I was not surprised that Trump is going to be our next president. He's going to be inaugurated a week from today. And we'll see what happens. The hard reality is we had two bad candidates. And really because we have two bad parties that are owned by corporations. So until we fix that, until Citizens United is reversed, until we have a Supreme Court that takes seriously that sovereign citizens that are individuals, are the ones that are prescribed rights and liberties and not corporate entities, we're going to have a lot of issues. As soon as we have unlimited corporate spending in politics, we're going to have issues. Because if I'm running for office and my job basically becomes being a perpetual fundraiser and I have to go to these corporations and raise millions of dollars, how am I going to have time to care about what Bill and Susie think up in the hills of Lincoln? I'm just not. So Democrats really need to regroup because they got smashed, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. I think Trump got like 41, 42, 43% of California, which shocked me. So that's probably going to continue. We'll segue into the tragedy that is Los Angeles right now and Southern California. I think it was last Saturday morning, I got a notification on my iPhone that said PDS warning, super high winds or ultra high winds, gusts up to 100 miles an hour. Now, where I live in the North San Fernando Valley, this time of year, we do get Santa Ana winds annually. It's a common thing. And we'll get gusts up to like 60, 70 miles an hour. Now, to be clear, they're not sustained winds. They're gusts, right? So they do damage. If you don't have the right type of furniture, which I do because I learned my lesson, or you don't have your furniture bolted down, like literally bolted down to the concrete in your backyard or whatever it may be, we have gusts that will send your table and umbrella and chairs into the neighbor's pool across the street or behind you or through your window if you're not careful. I have heard and seen of all those things happening up here in the North San Fernando Valley. So I didn't think much of it other than I realized this. I've never gotten a warning like this, like I've seen, it's going to be windy, but never a special warning. Turns out this is the first time they've given 4 of them in the last 3 months. And so clearly Karen Bass and Governor Newsom must have had the warning well before myself and us and the general public had it. And so I thought, okay, well, I'm going to take some extra precautions and extra bundling things up outside and taking some stuff into the garage and et cetera, et cetera. And so then we have Tuesday night. I come out to take the trash out and I look at the hillside that's about 1.5 miles to the northeast of my front yard. And my house is kind of up on a promontory, so I was able to get a good view of it. And the hillside that was burning 5 years ago was on fire. So I throw my trash away. I come back and say, oh my gosh, babe, to my wife, the hillside across the 5 is on fire. And of course, turn on the news, and of course, the Hearst fire is going there. And then, of course, I found out the Palisades fire was going. Didn't know about that until then. And, we got a little concerned, but it ended up for us working out okay. The fire did not jump the 5 freeway, which would have come over to our side of the mountain. And it blew up towards Santa Clarita, and they got that one under control. I don't think there was any structures damaged in that one. We didn't even get any smoke really over here, which was great. And then we had an arsonist like 2 days later try to light up the park that's up the road, and it did get lit up. It was called the Archer Fire, and that one was put out like in 2 hours, thankfully. Thank you to all the firefighters. I do not envy your jobs. Very difficult work under constrained circumstances and challenging times, and a lack of resources, I guess is the way to put it. So I thought, wow, okay, great, disaster averted. Turn on the TV, and all of a sudden you just see Altadena on fire. Eaton Canyon's lit up like a freaking rocket ship. You see Palisades, literally homes burning down. We're talking whole neighborhoods. And I got to say, as somebody who grew up in Burbank, somebody who lived in Pasadena for a decade, I did my graduate school in Pasadena, and I'm there all the time. My office is in Pasadena. It was emotional for me. I have 11 friends that live in Altadena. And of the 11 friends, 9 of their homes burned to the ground, and one of them, their whole roof was torn off from the wind. So, all that to say, Altadena is a neighborhood of 115 to 130-year-old homes. So they were built like the late 1890s, early 1905, 1910, early 1900s. And they have churches that are 125, 130 years old, and schools that are very old. It's kind of an enclave. It's a unique community. It's got wealthy people, and it's got Black, brown, Hispanic, white professionals. It's got a mixture of everything. It really was a haven for people who wanted to be kind of near hiking trails and kind of have a little bit of old-timey feel to it, small town feel to it. There's a couple places like Sierra Madre next door has a similar vibe, different but similar, that you kind of are in those places. And even though you're in the heart of Los Angeles, you don't feel like you are. You feel like you're in the high Sierras, okay? And you kind of feel like you're a little bit stepped back into time a little bit. Time slows down up there. So I see all this devastation. I mean, I drove by there this morning to go to my office from the 210 freeway. I could look out at Altadena, and from the base of the foothills, a good 2-3 miles down, every tree line is black, just tar black, right? And of course, needless to say, most, if not all, the houses below those tree lines are also leveled in ashes. The level of devastation, I think, there's no words for it. You're talking about young kids that don't have their homes or their schools anymore. You're talking about people who have lived there 50, 60, 70 years and have businesses in their home and their business burned down. And I just don't see how that's going to come back. I mean, the amount of excavation that's going to have to be done, the amount of people forget with homeowners insurance policies. Most of us get one because we have to if we have a mortgage. A lot of these elderly people are either underinsured or not insured at all. A lot of times when somebody retires and they own a home free and clear, they typically radically reduce their policy or they get rid of it altogether because they're on a fixed income and they don't think anything's going to happen. A lot of people only get the homeowners policy because the mortgage company forces them to have one while they have a mortgage on the home. And so you have a bunch of widows up there, elderly couples that are retired, young people who just scraped everything together to buy their first home and everything in between. And it's gone. And unfortunately, barring the federal government stepping in, the outlook's not bright, because what's going to end up happening is, in my view, is these insurance companies in general are not in the business of trying to pay you out easily. So when they're going to have, hundreds, if not thousands of claims all at once, they're going to do everything they can. So the first thing is most people's home insurance there is probably, I think large number were dropped altogether in July. That's been happening here for the last 2 years in Southern California and in California in general. And you're going to have a lot of people that find out that insurance doesn't insure for market value. So if your home that you bought 30 years ago for $300,000 and you've paid it off and now market value was worth $1.3 million. So you're thinking, great, I have a $1.3 million asset free and clear in addition to my retirement or whatever it may be, Social Security, 401k, pension, etc. You're going to find out that you're only insured for the rebuild value that you classified back when you got your policy. Most people are not calling into their insurance company on an annual basis saying, hey, I want to reevaluate my coverage so you can make my insurance go up. So if you think about it, if people haven't adjusted their insurance proactively over the last 10, 20, 30 years, they're insured for what it costs to rebuild a decade ago or more. And costs have gone up exponentially. So you're going to find a lot of people that even have insurance. They might get a $600,000, $800,000 payout, but it's going to cost them $1 million to rebuild. And it's probably going to be, I bet it's going to be 2 to 4 years before people are actually moving into new homes. Probably closer to 4 years would be my bet before any new homes are ready to be built or ready to be moved into up there in Altadena, and probably the Palisades as well. Some of that is just, red tape and BS, but a lot of that is because they're going to have to excavate those lots. They're going to have to probably put new lines in. They're going to have to investigate and make sure the integrity of gas lines, sewer lines, water lines, all those things, that they're replaced and not contaminated. They're going to have to do soil testing, all kinds of things. So the reality is, and I had a stat that I posted on my Instagram at the Sam Andrus that showed in the Wildfires, which was about, I think 4 or 5 years ago, over towards Thousand Oaks, there's about 1,500 plus homes that were destroyed. And as of to date, only 30% of the residents that burned down there have rebuilt and now moved back in. Meaning they're estimating about 70% of the people that their homes burned down, they're not rebuilding and they're not coming back. A lot of them probably, which is what's going to happen here, we'll see, are going to take an insurance payout, because the quickest way for them to get their lives back on track and quote unquote normalcy is to just give me that $700,000 check. Now I'm going to go try to get a down payment on another home, and that's going to be very tough for senior citizens who own a property free and clear. They had a small property tax payment, and now they're potentially looking at having a mortgage, or moving out of state or whatever it may be. There's going to be a lot of issues there that I foresee, and it's a shame. And on that, I want to segue to California, and Los Angeles and Los Angeles County. California is in trouble if we don't end this democratic hegemony, this democratic insular party that basically has lost its mind. The There's a lot of things that are very irrational, that are very unnecessary, that are not A priorities, that are voted on routinely. They're really pet projects. They're these kind of fringe issues that, for whatever reason, because they have no challengers, essentially. Because I think ultimately people think that if they vote Democrat, they're voting good people. And unfortunately, there may be some truth to that, but unfortunately, people that don't have any challenge or any counterbalance can very quickly devolve into self-delusion and self-confidence and start engaging in all kinds of fanciful fringe ideas and activities. And I think that's what we're seeing. I think you look at Gavin Newsom. Again, I got into a conversation with a family member and, love him, but we vehemently disagreed. And his point was like, you can't say that Karen Bass caused this fire. You can't say Gavin Newsom caused this fire. And I said, well, no, I'm not saying they literally caused it, but they're culpable. One, they're elected leaders and this happened under their watch. Buck stops with them, period. You're the governor of California. You're the mayor of Los Angeles. The buck stops with you. End of discussion. So de facto, as a leader, as an elected official, you take some ownership and blame for what happened. Now, I'm blaming them. I'm taking issue with what happened before the fire and what happened after. You can look this all up. California has voted in significant billions of dollars in water project money of all kind. Reservoirs, containers, aquifers, this, that, the other. Most recently was in 2014. That one that we voted in 2014 was hundreds of millions of dollars. Not one of the reservoir sites has been constructed. We have not constructed a significant water reservoir in Southern California since Diamond Valley Lake in 1996. 2006, 16. That's 30 years ago was the last major water project. The population has grown exponentially since then, okay? We've got a lot of problems. It's been exposed that if the system is taxed beyond just normal city usage, we don't have what we need. Now you couple that with the Santa Ynez Reservoir, which is just minutes behind the hillside of Pacific Palisades. It's been drained since last February for maintenance. So the leaders of LEDWP and the city and the state allowed it to remain empty for nearly a year so far through the middle of fire season with no contingency plan for water should a disaster take place. That is unacceptable. California seemingly leases most of its water-dropping planes from Canada, and at the end of December, returned the planes back to Canada, so we were stuck waiting for more planes to come back down from Canada. This is completely untenable. For a state that has a budget of $230 billion, give or take annually, for a city that has a $14 billion budget annually, it is unacceptable that we don't have a ready-to-go serviceable fleet of planes and copters that are dedicated to these things, that they can be strategically positioned, that I get that when it's windy, you can't fly them. I understand that. I'm not stupid. But you can be timely once you can fly them. And the other thing is, we should be doing year-round mitigation of our forests. We should have bulldozing lines. We should have groups, pay them well paid. Who cares? Pay them to do the hard work to go in and clear and clean dead brush out and trees out of our forest, at least as it pertains to like the nearest, 3,000 feet from property areas, right? Not the whole mountainside, but management near where developments are. That's just common sense. And it happens in every other state. It should happen here. We should be the leaders in doing that, but we aren't. And there's a lot of complicated reasons for that shouldn't be, but they are. And so we as citizens have to get back to demanding our officials deliver outcomes, right? We got to have outcomes where we spend money and 5 years later we see the tangible benefit that was completed because of measure A or D or whatever was voted in to do that. It's unacceptable that in 2014 we voted money in to construct water reservoirs and storage, and 10 years later, 11 years later, we haven't even broke ground on one. I mean, that's unacceptable. So that's what I'm going to say on that. I do think Karen Bass should resign immediately. I think Gavin Newsom should resign immediately. He won't because he's a narcissist. And, just things you can't say. You can't be the mayor of Here's another thing. We don't need our government, state government, and local city politicians. There's no purpose for you to need to travel internationally. The only thing I could think of for a mayor or a governor to travel internationally for official business would be if we had like a sister city relationship and it was some pre-planned ceremony. But even then, if you find out there's going to be a massive wind event happening in the city 5 days out, you cancel that or you postpone it. Your fiduciary obligation is to the citizens that put you in office in Los Angeles, period. Los Angeles has no relationship from a business standpoint or a political standpoint with Ghana, Africa. There's zero reason Karen Bass should have been in Ghana, Africa on official business. None. Zero. Gavin Newsom does this. He goes on these junkets to Central America, Honduras, El Salvador, talking about healthcare. Why? Why? You're the governor of California. Let a congressional representative do that, or delegation do that, or the president do that. That's their role. The state and municipal role has nothing to do with stuff happening in other countries, or frankly, even really other states, for the most part. So that said, I think both of them should resign. Karen Bass was in overhead day one. Rick Caruso should have been the mayor of Los Angeles. The mayor requires somebody of skill, intellect, and actionable competence and communication abilities, of which Karen Bass has none. Okay, Eric Garcetti was a decent communicator, but he had no actionable competence. Okay, executionary competence. Gavin Newsom, he's been in the governor's office for 14 years. He was lieutenant governor for 8 years, and he's been the governor for 6. He has done nothing demonstrably after all these fires have happened for the last decade plus to ramp up and spend money. We spent $24 billion on homelessness that we can't account for, and we have less than $1 billion spent on LA Fire Department annually. It just doesn't make sense. Segueing to that, the statistic is, this is eye-opening. LA Fire Department reports that 55% of all their calls on a daily basis are to homeless, drug, and mentally ill addicted people on the streets. More than half of their calls every single day on average are for people pertaining to the homelessness pandemic. That's unacceptable, period. These people need to be brought to intake centers. They need to have professionals evaluate them. They need to either have families that come and take them in, which many probably have tried and they've given up, rightly so. I have a dad who's schizophrenic, so I understand how that is. Or they need to be admitted to mental facilities, which we need to build, and or drug addiction facilities. It needs to be mandated. There needs to be zero tolerance. You cannot just street dwell. Sorry, you can't do it. And what's crazy is upwards of 90% of the fires started in the city of Los Angeles, it could be a trash can fire, a dumpster fire, whatever it may be, are started by these homeless people. So they are taking away resources that all of us pay taxes for. So that I'll give you an example. The New York City is about 300, actually a little less than 300 square miles. LA is a little under 500 square miles. So LA is about landmass, it's about 200 square miles bigger than New York City. Okay. We have 9,000 police officers. New York City, which is 200 square miles smaller, has 42,000. That's insane. That means that we really should have 2, probably 3 times the police force we have. And I'll bring it home. Where I am here up in the North San Fernando Valley, I talked to our senior lead officer. Usually annually, I go to like one of the coffee with a cop type things in my neighborhood. And he'll tell me, Sam, there's one basic car, one patrol car for the North San Fernando Valley, Granada Hills, Porter Ranch, Chatsworth. And there's one for probably about 100,000 people. One car that's assigned to be driving in those areas. And he told me, quite frankly, you're going to hate to hear this, but most of the time, 80% of the time, 75% of the time, it's in other districts answering calls over there. Okay, that's a problem. That is a failed city. Los Angeles Park and Recreation has failed. The city doesn't have the funds to maintain their parks, or they do, but they don't use it. They don't maintain their parks. They don't run their own youth programs. They allow nonprofits to come in, like Little League and Pony and those, to come in and run baseball leagues and such, and charge them a fee. Make them pay for everything, the field maintenance, repairs and all that, and then charge them a fee to lease it and pay for all those things. It's absolutely absurd, okay? For a city that has so much money, it's absolutely absurd. But here we are. So a lot of things are going to have to change in LA and in California. We're going to have to demand more of our elected officials. We're going to have to, there's probably going to be some lawsuits filed. I'm positive of that. We'll see how that goes. But for those of you that were affected by the fires directly. You know, it goes out saying there's the hard part is there's no words. You want to say words. You want to, send your love. You want to hug people. You want to tell them you'll be for them. And what I've done is my wife and I have given financially the way that we're able to. And the need is just, it's so massive. It's a little overwhelming because you're like, what is my pittance going to do? But we've done our giving on that financially. And those that have greater capacity have been doing it. And thank you so much. I'm so proud of my church, Christian Assembly in Eagle Rock, has given committed to giving about $500,000 to 30 families that had their homes burned to ashes in our church community in Eagle Rock. We had about 30 families in Altadena that lost their homes. And so it sounds like about 15 to 20 grand is going to be handed out by our church to each of those families to help not fix things, but to help show our love and care the way Jesus would want us to, and to ensure that they have some funds to kind of bridge the loss and gap and of all the personal items lost and those sorts of things, right? What we've also done or doing at my church is they're putting a care team of people that of every member that had a loss. So they'll have a team of people that's going to walk with them for the next year or two to be a resource to help to do whatever it may be. So I've let my friends know and my clients know in the coming days. I don't presume to know how I can help somebody, but I let them know in the coming days and weeks as the dust settles, if you need an extra set of hands, you need somebody to run errands for you, somebody to drop stuff off, deliver stuff for you, whatever it may be, feel free to call me. I want to be that for you. And so, it's just hard. And I think at a time like this, most people don't know what they need because it's just shock and awe for, probably the next several weeks. A lot of complicated issues they're dealing with emotionally and financially and logistically. And so I think the best thing we could do for everybody is just let those that know that you're there for them, to be a physical resource of labor, extra hands, extra set of wheels, whatever it may be that you can provide them, to let them know that they're loved and cared for and that you want to be there for them. So that said, it's going to be very interesting to see how things move forward. I do think, and all this will be my last kind of segment here, I do think Gavin Newsom's political career is done. I don't see how he ever comes back from this. By the fact that he was the elected official under which this happened, he owns it by default. But then he doubles down and says the most asinine, tone-deaf things. Karen Bass is a zero to begin with, and I don't think she's going to be have any political career after this once she's the mayor. They both very well may be recalled here, and they should be if they don't resign. But if they had any pride, they would resign out of respect for the families and for the citizens. So we'll see what happens. But in the meantime, this is my new reboot episode. Hopefully it'll get better each time. I hope you all are doing well enough. I hope that you'll feel blessed in the coming weeks as things move on, and stay safe out there. Be blessed, y'all.